My Lords, I am very grateful to my noble friend Lord Lansley for posing those very interesting questions, which I think, I'm sure the government has answers to them, but it does illustrate that this legislation is essentially very rushed legislation that hasn't been properly considered by the government. I can't resist, I promise not to repeat myself from committee, but I can't resist referring back to the final impact assessment produced by the Department for Transport, which said that the purpose of this bill is to meet a manifesto commitment. Therefore, we haven't undertaken our normal practice of looking at alternative methods by which the same objectives might be achieved, because we're all in a terrible rush because the government wants to have a headline, essentially, and it wants to get ahead of the franchises as they expire. So I appreciate what my noble friend Lord Lansley has said, and I look forward to the government's reply. I rise to speak principally to Amendments 5 and 6 standing in my name. I just say in advance they are linked, and if 5 were to pass, then I understand that there's been discussion with the government front bench that 6 would pass without division if that were the case, because they are linked, to avoid having two votes on the same topic. My Lords, in committee I referred to two different models by which the private sector might be involved in the running of railways. The one is the franchise system that we are currently discussing, which is the main subject of this bill. But the other, which is generally dubbed the concession system, is the one used by Transport for London for the operation of all of its services other than London Underground being directly provided by Transport for London, but all the other services, the buses, London Overground, the DLR, the tram, and so forth, are provided under a concession system. That is, they're run by private companies on a contract. The key difference between the franchise system and the concession system is that under the franchise system, as envisaged at privatisation, the fares risk rests with the operator. That was the model that was set up back when privatisation was introduced. If the fares went up, if they generated more fares income, they would keep it. If they lost money on fares, that would be their problem. If they didn't make money because the fares weren't good enough. They had the incentive to generate more fares, principally by generating more passengers through all the clever things that they would do. And I was frank and straightforward in saying it in the debate at second reading that aspect of privatisation has never worked well, because essentially private operators are not in control of fares income, which really is closely correlated with the economic cycle, which of course they can't control, manage, or in any serious way mitigate. So that aspect has never worked well, and of course COVID put an end to it in any meaningful sense, and it's never recovered from that, nor, given this legislation, is it ever going to have the chance to recover from that. But the concession system is different in that the fares risk remains with the franchisor. In the case of Transport for London is the franchisor of the services I referred to, and it retains the fares risk. So the obligation of the private sector operator is simply to have the trains, the equipment in the right place, pointing in the right direction first thing in the morning, properly staffed, clean to a certain standard, and so forth. And if they fail to do those things, they will suffer financial penalties. But the important point is that all of those things are within their own control. And they receive for that a fee, but what turns out in practice, because of competition, to be a very modest fee, because the risk to them is very, very limited. The risks are all things that it's just a matter of doing their job properly. And if they do it properly, they will get that modest fee without penalty. Now, the purpose of Amendment 5 is to open up as an option, it makes no obligation on the Secretary of State, to open up as an option the possibility that in awarding new, or when a franchise is terminated, that they would have the option of awarding it not only, as the bill is currently drafted, only to a public sector company, a subsidiary of the Department for Transport, but they would have the option of awarding it to a private sector entity on a concession basis. And the reason for it simply is that we know that it works. We know from Transport for London that the system can be made to work very effectively. We know that some of the best services on the Transport for London network, some of the best modes, are provided under this system. So why should it be that the government would want to rule that out? Of course, there could be a role for the private sector operating on that concessionary basis. It would, in addition, as my noble friend Lord Lansley said in reference to his amendment, which gives the government more options than mine does. Mine gives the government one extra option. He would give the government effectively limitless options by deleting the word only, whatever options might be available. But it does, as I say, give as he says, give the government more flexibility in dealing with circumstances that they may not always have foreseen when they drafted this bill. Amendment number 6 goes with Amendment number 5 simply by defining in a separate clause what I mean by concession. So number 5 opens up the choice to do something on a concession basis, and number 6 says what is a concession. Despite every effort on the part of the Public Bill Office and myself, we couldn't quite combine these into one amendment. So they stand on the Marshal's list as 2 amendments, but as I say, in practice, closely linked because one amplifies and clarifies the other. So I would very much like to hear from the Minister why Amendment 5 would not be acceptable, except to a control freak, which appears to be maybe the government's vision for the railways.